very much been around that, not just in the work that he does here in South Africa, but in the work that he's done all over the world. And so if you are in any way prone to performance anxiety, well, then I would suggest you mute me until I hand over to Graeme. But just a brief introduction to Dr. Graeme Codrington. He's an author, he's a speaker, and he's really a globally renowned expert on the future of the world of work. And he works with companies, with leaders, and with teams to help them not only understand, but also respond to the future world of work. He also has 5 degrees, as I said, cue that performance anxiety, and 5 best-selling books. And the last number that I could get in terms of the amount of people that he reached was approximately 100,000 people a year in up to 20 countries. I imagine that number has potentially actually increased now with COVID, and the digital opportunities are presenting to even more people around the world. So that's his public persona, that's his public profile, and one that is certainly very impressive. His more personal profile is, in my experience of him, having known him for quite a few years, he is a deeply decent, very generous, and massively abundant thinking human being. And so I'm not surprised, but I am exceptionally grateful on behalf of the whole of Cotlands that he did generously and abundantly give of his time today to share some of the things that not just we as Cotlands are grappling with, but all of us are grappling with. So Graeme, reorganize, rethink, reignite, re-inspire. I think you're going to do all of that for us. And thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Niven. What a wonderful introduction. Really appreciate it. And it's a real privilege and pleasure to be part of this event and to be celebrating 85 years with you. If you would please just remember to spotlight me now, if we can just get the organizers to spotlight my presentation. I'm going to have some slides behind me. And if you can't see my full screen, and the slides that are behind me, what you need to just do is roll over my name and you'll see 3 little dots pop up. And then if you click on those, you can select pin to screen or fit to frame or whatever version of Teams you've got will help you to be able to see me and my slides. You can see I've been asked to talk about, we called it the sort of the future of early childhood development. I'm not the ECD expert. I'm really here to just talk about the future. If we're celebrating 85 years into the past, let's also think about 85 years into the future if we can. Now we're going to try and make this session just a little bit interactive. So if you can and are willing to play along with me, won't you grab your mobile phone, point the camera at that QR code and it will open up this website. If you don't have your camera handy or it doesn't work for you, go to any browser on your phone or on your computer, go to ahaslides.com/Cotlands. Please do that with me. We'll see the question, what city are you logging in from? Just type in the name of your city, put the full name in, and we'll build a word cloud. I want to get a little bit interactive during the presentation. So once you've put that in, please keep that open. And we'll use that AHA Slides system to get your input and feedback on the future in a second. Thank you. Let me show you what I can see, just so that you can see why I'm doing this. There we go. So most people from Johannesburg. Maybe next time we can do this face to face. I'm also based in Johannesburg. Now we've got Pretoria and Port Shepstone. I love the fact that somebody thinks Brits is a city. Hey, I'm with you. Sandton, there we go. Excellent. Okay, so keep that open and we'll come back and use that system in a second. So as I said, if we're celebrating and really appreciating 85 years of what Cotlands has done, the question is, well, what might the next 85 years look like if we look into the future? And when we do that, even though this is what I do for a living, I'm a researcher and a futurist and somebody who tries to spot the disruptive forces coming, it's really difficult. I think it's always been difficult, but I think it's maybe even more difficult now than it's been to look ahead. So just to prove the point, I wonder if we went back 85 years and back to the start of Cotlands, so that's 1936, right? And imagined what the world might look like going forward, trying to predict what the future would look like from 1936. I mean, remember 1936, right? Just to choose one example, Alexander Fleming had discovered penicillin a few years earlier, but it still wasn't available as a medicine. So, if we're talking about vaccines and COVID and everything else, we didn't even have penicillin in 1936. But I was amazed, and it was a wonderful coincidence that this little machine was invented in 1936. This is Alan Turing's counting machine, which essentially most people refer to as the first modern computer. 1936, 85 years ago, computing was invented at the same time as Cotlands. So Cotlands has essentially been around for the whole of the computer age. I mean, I say that, but you didn't really get the world's first sort of working computer until 10 years after that. And it was into the 1950s already when IBM came out with their first mainframe computer. And by the way, in 1952, the chairman of IBM had been around for a while already, but they did cash registers. It was International Business Machines. Did you know that? So they made basically cash registers and manual machines. And the chairman of IBM said that he thought there was a worldwide market for only 4 computers. He was trying to argue for IBM to really not get into the market because he didn't think there was a market. Do you want to know what he thought that was? It was the American government, the British government, the Russian government, and Ford Motor Company. He thought those were the only 4 customers for computers. Imagine, that was in the early 1950s. Now, I mean, obviously, we could go on, but 85 years ago, I think it would have been impossible to imagine the world that we live in now. Well, let me see what you think. Won't you get involved now? So go to that AHA slide system. It'll tell you I've moved on to the new slide and you just need to refresh it. What do you think is the most remarkable innovation or change in society? So don't only think of technologies. There might be shifts in society that have happened in the last 85 years, which will kind of blow people's socks off. While you're putting in your top idea, or put in 2 or 3 if you want to. My grandmother, my father's mother, was born in 1914 in the Eastern Cape. And she lived to 104 years old. She only passed away 3 or 4 years ago. And I remember a few years before she died, my brother who makes videos, he lives in Atlanta and works for, outsources for CNN and so on. So, I mean, he does it professionally. He took a camera and he went across to my grandmother's house and he spent a day with her just filming him asking her questions about her life. I mean, the wisdom in a 100-year life. And one of the questions he asked her was, what is the most remarkable thing that's happened in your life? And in an instant, she didn't even need to think about it. She had her answer prepared in advance. She said that human beings have walked on the moon. Now, if you think about that, that happened in 1969, essentially halfway through her life. And yet, 100 years of life, she looked back and she said that is still mind-blowing to her. She still can't get her head around that. I think it is, for some people, literally unbelievable what has happened in the last 85 years. Let's see what you're saying. Let's have a look here. Contraceptive pill. That's an interesting one. My generation was the first generation that our mothers could take a pill to not have. That's maybe not the best way to frame it, but it's a very interesting thing from a demographic perspective. And that, of course, changed the role of women in society, and the role of mothers in society as well. That would probably be on my list, I agree. Obviously, you're putting in a lot of stuff around computers and microchips and communications. There we go. Somebody else put in moon landing and space travel and so on, the World Wide Web, smartphone. Hidden behind, oh no, there you can just see it. More female drivers. I'm sure there's a story behind that. It's remarkable, isn't it? What has happened in the world around us in the last 85 years. So how on earth do we look ahead 85 years into the future and say, what might the world look like in the next century? What might happen then? And if we're thinking about what's going to happen to children, a child born today, what type of life are they going to live? If our focus is on early childhood development, what on earth are we developing them for? What type of skill sets and knowledge are they going to have to survive? It's quite a question, isn't it? I'm not sure I've got a full answer, because we could spend 5 or 6 hours now giving a list of all the technologies that I think are coming. I really think the next 20 to 30 years, not even going beyond that, is going to be remarkable. 85 years from now, I'm pretty certain we'll have people working on the moon and possibly on Mars as well. I think there's a high probability there. We'll have flying cars. Driverless cars will be compulsory. Forget alone legal. Nobody will be allowed to drive when we work out how driverless cars work. You know, the list would go on and on. So what I've done is I've pulled out 3 or 4 things, and I've tried to think of what a child born today might experience. And the first thing I think that we need to acknowledge is that a child born today is definitely going to live more than 100 years. I mean, here's some facts for you, right? More than half of all the people who have ever turned 80 are still alive. There's a thought for you. Some of you might need to hear that one again. Over half of all the people in the history of the world who've ever turned 80 are still alive. In the last 85 years, life expectancy has nearly doubled. Imagine it doubles again. I'm not joking. I think that we are about to see unbelievable advances in medical science. We're already seeing this with, all of us are now familiar. Niven was talking about some of the words that have come out of our lockdown. Now, one of the words that most people didn't know before this was mRNA, messenger ribonucleic acid. And then last year's Nobel Prize winner for medicine, CRISPR technologies. I can show off here just a little bit. Clustered, regularly interspersed short palindromic repeats of the DNA and RNA code. That's what it stands for in English. Our ability to edit our DNA. That's not what's in your vaccines, by the way, in case you're nervous. mRNA is just sending some information to your body to say, here's what to look out for if a vaccine, if a virus comes your way, and here's what to do about it. CRISPR actually gives us the opportunity to edit some of our DNA, in particular to remove genetic diseases. I've got a number of clients who are in the pharmaceutical world, and I cannot tell you that they're almost like vibrating with excitement. As soon as we've dealt with COVID and they can focus their energies back on other diseases, they are absolutely convinced that some of these technologies, which have been around for a while, but we're now learning how to use them properly, are going to be able to be used to cure cancers and genetic diseases and all sorts of things. I'm 50 years old, and I want to see the next century, which means I'm going to have to live to 130 if you haven't done the maths. Maybe I can go to 136 and be the keynote presenter at the next, now my maths is letting me down, 170 year anniversary of Cotlands. Please pencil me in as your keynote speaker. I plan to be there. And I'm not joking about that. I really am not. Some of you might think, hyperbolic, hypothetical statement. No, genuinely, I think we are going to develop the ability to increase longevity dramatically. And I want to live that long. Not with all original parts, fair enough. I think I'm going to have some replacement parts and possibly some engineering and computing assistance. I think that's going to be one of the themes of the next 85 years. And maybe in a few decades' time, early childhood development is working out which chips you need to implant so that people can get the right knowledge, and then what skills to impart so that we can have the right relationships. I don't think computers are ever going to take over in terms of emotions and relationships. Some of you are thinking, no ways, I don't want to be that old. And that's because we have an inability to imagine that things might look different from what they are now. You've got a picture of what 100 years looks like, and you don't want to be that old, I'm sure. I don't either. I want to be younger longer. Imagine this is what 100 years looks like. I'm up for that, aren't you? I'd love to be younger longer. This is what we're going to have to get our heads around in the next 85 years. Not just that we have one or two things speeding up or one or two things changing, but that entire systems change, the ecosystem changes. It's a remarkable world that lies ahead of us. Well, again, let me get you involved here. I've just picked one example. I picked an example out of 100 examples that I could give you. Just this idea of extending lifespans, longevity, some of the medical technologies that are going to need to go with our shift in lifestyles. Maybe the way that we eat needs to be added into that, more vegetarian, more friendly to the world around us. We're certainly going to have to be thinking more about energy and natural resources and our use and overuse and abuse of the planet. We're going to have to fix all of that. We're going to have to sort out food security. So again, now I'm maybe over talking because I could go for an hour just talking about all the things we'd have to do if I'm going to live to 130. But what do you think might change the world and might innovate the way in which we live and work and engage with the world that's most needed? What do you think we need to change the most in the world around us? I'll come to your thoughts in a second. Please put some ideas in. But I think a few of you see some of the things that I see. Because as much as I am excited and as much as I do believe that was it Martin Luther King who said that the arc of history bends towards justice? Something I'm sure I'm not quoting him accurately. But yeah, the progress, I think, happens. Sometimes we take 2 steps back, sometimes we take a few steps forward. But I am a believer in progress and that we have the ability at least to make decisions that make the world a better place. But we also face a hang of a lot of issues, right? I mean, some of you are putting this into AHA slides. Extreme weather and climate change and our use and abuse of natural resources. I'm particularly worried about water and access to water, which obviously then flows into access to food and food security. That's a global thing, but obviously a huge African issue as well. Some of you are putting this one in as well. It was on my list. Wealth inequality. It's probably never been worse than it's been now. I mean, last year was a fantastic year to already be a billionaire. The billionaires did really well last year, and the top-end millionaires. Hopefully one of them will take a shining to Cotlands and send you a little fraction of a percentage of their wealth accumulation from last year. It's a really tough year to be poor, right? Really tough year. And wealth inequality is now as bad as it's ever been. And that's not just a South African statement. That's a global issue all around the world. history tells us, and I don't want to be a downer at the 85-year birthday party, but history tells us what happens when wealth inequality gets too big, right? It happens every time, and it's the only thing that happens. The poor people kill the rich people. That's not a metaphor or a euphemism. I mean, genuinely, we call them revolutions. They happen. I think that we are looking ahead at massive geopolitical unrest, massive economic shifts and changes. We're already seeing it. I think politics is in real trouble all around the world. Look at who makes it into parliaments around the world, and the types of people who've become politicians over the last few years, and the mess they're making. That's everywhere. That's not a specifically African or South African statement. That's all around the world. And our economic systems are unjust, I think, at the moment. What we're going to need is we're going to need fresh eyes. Where am I going with all of this? I'm excited as I think of what a child born today might do in this world. Those of us who are 50 years and older, we've kind of mucked it up a bit. And as much as we need to be involved in fixing it, I think we're kind of handing a bit of a messed up job to the next generation. And I have got great hopes that they will be able to do something to fix these issues, some of these issues. Let's have a look at some of the issues that you were talking about. So what innovation or change in society is most needed? I think some of these echo what I was saying around carbon, around our use and abuse of our natural resources. I like somebody 3D printed organs. That's how I plan to get to the next century, no doubt. As I say, not all original parts. Yeah, we've got to think about the way that we live on the planet, eradicate xenophobia. Yeah, living together, as in together with other people who are different to us. And big paradigm shifts in the way that we manage the world around us. I think we're all on the same page here. And here's our issue, right? As we sit here looking back at 85 years of an organization that in many different ways has served the needs of the most vulnerable, and especially the needs of the youngest members of our world, of our society. I cannot think of a more important contribution for an organization or a group of donors, or for you as individuals who are donors and are supporters of the work that Cotlands does. I can't think of a more important time in human history for us to be focusing on making sure that we build the foundations of a new generation who can take us through what is going to be a few decades of chaos. We've got to unpick some of the problems we've created, and we've got to reimagine what a great world to live on might be. And I think currently the leaders of our world and the leaders of our countries and the leaders of industries, I think they've run out of ideas. I think they've come to the natural end of an era. For the last 85 years, for all of the time that Cotlands has been around, two big political systems have been fighting it out to work out which of these is the correct answer to how do we live a good life together. Capitalism and communism. And both of them have failed. To be fair to both of them, neither of them were implemented in their pure forms anywhere in the world. But we've had this East versus West, this capitalism versus communism, fighting it out on the world stage. And you can now look all around the world and you can say neither of these have delivered what they were supposed to deliver. And in fact, for the same reason, the rich elite people in the system have taken it over and are just skimming, well, more than skimming off the top. They're basically taking the top half for themselves, the top 1%. And that's happening in both sides of those systems. Those systems aren't working. We can see that. We can see in the comments that you've put into our slides here that if we carry on going the way that we're going, we've broken our system, and we need a new generation with new eyes and a fresh vision of the future to stand up and say, here's a new way to go. I'm terribly excited to see what the young people will bring us. But they're not going to be able to do that if they don't have that solid foundation. Solid foundation is not just shoving facts into their heads. It's not just getting them to be able to memorize Wikipedia, or, sorry, for those of you who my age, Encyclopedia Britannica, if you prefer, and just, getting all that information in their heads. It's got to do with their ability to think, their ability to engage. It's emotional intelligence, it's cultural intelligence, it's diversity intelligence. It's creating a generation of better rounded people who don't get sucked into all of the things that we have been. I think somebody's just switched on their microphone. If you could just make sure you're all muted for us, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. Let me give you a few examples of the type of children I'm talking about. Here's Taylor Wilson, who at the age of 15 became the youngest person to ever build a nuclear reactor in his parents' garage. He believes that we need different ways of creating energy, and he was inspired by a place called ITER. ITER is the International Thermonuclear Experimental Reactor. Go and look at iter.org online. It's a nuclear fusion plant that's being built in France. It's based on tokamak reactor technology. Maybe too much information for some of you, but it's the good type of nuclear. The only outputs are heat and steam. The input you need is deuterium and tritium, which sounds impressive, except it's seawater. Deuterium and tritium are most easily found in seawater. So we're basically building a star that is fueled by seawater and has heat as its outcome, which then they use to get turbines going, and you get basically clean, green, free energy. It is unbelievable. And it's a massive multi-billion-dollar project. And old Taylor Wilson thought, I think I could build a small tabletop version of that for a high school project. He got noticed when the FBI knocked on the front door and said, "Why are you buying uranium?" He had put a consignment of uranium on his parents' credit card. I'm not joking. This is a remarkable story. You actually can't make this stuff up, right? But check him out, Taylor Wilson. He's a pioneer in alternative energy before he finished high school. If we're talking energy and pioneers, well, let's have an African story. This is William Kamwamba, who at 14 years old, again, a number of years ago in Malawi, basically his village didn't have any power. So he jerry-rigged a turbine with a bicycle, and he was able to bring electricity and water to his village in Malawi. And he's gone on now, he's got some wonderful TED Talks and books, and has become an innovator. It doesn't have to be the high-tech stuff to change the world. Here's another teenager, a guy called Boyan Slat. He's American, but I think Eastern European parents. And at the age of, again, 14, it's interesting that number keeps coming up. He did a high school project on plastic and ocean pollution. And he took the idea of a pool skimmer. You know, the skimmer in your pool that gathers up all the leaves off the top of the surface and puts it into a net. And he wondered whether that could be done for the whole ocean. He did a school project. It eventually got international awards and acclaim. And he now lives on a boat in the Pacific Ocean, putting that 14-year-old's project into real life, trying to clean up the world's oceans. And apparently doing a remarkable job. Boyan Slat, look him up. Now, maybe two more familiar names to you. This is Malala Yousafzai, who's a previous Nobel Prize winner, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, again as a teenager, for standing up for girls' rights and girls' rights to education, if we're bringing it back to the theme of the day here with Cotlands. And I'm pretty certain if I tell you I've got one more person to show you, that you could probably guess who it's going to be. Yes, Greta Thunberg, who, again, at the age of 14, started on her remarkable journey of just becoming a climate activist. And I know some people accuse her of saying, well, she doesn't seem to have any solutions. Of course she doesn't. She's a 16-year-old girl on the autism spectrum. She's not supposed to have the solutions, but she's got a wonderful, clear, brilliant, incisive voice about the problem. And it's up to the rest of us to step in and support her and Malala and Boyan and William and Taylor and the thousands, the tens of thousands, the millions of other children that Cotlands wants to support. That's what the next 85 years needs to be about. That we just keep helping the next generation to grow, to develop, to contribute to the future. Can we predict what the future is going to bring? I don't think so. But the best preparation that we have for that future is to make sure that each successive generation of young people who join us on this planet, who add to the communities that we live in, are equipped, are energized, are available to give their best. And as you've heard from Niven, and as we will hear from Monica in a moment, if we don't get that right in the first 5 years of their lives, we've missed the biggest opportunity to get that right. It's a real privilege to be part of this 85 years celebration, and it's a real hope that if I do survive to the 170th anniversary of Cotlands, that we would be celebrating just as much of an contribution to society in the next 85 years as we have cause to celebrate right now. We probably have a few minutes. I don't know if there are any questions. I don't know if anybody wants to come in and contribute. I even just add to what I've said. If you don't have a specific question for myself, please feel free to throw a question. I see, Amanda, you've put something into the chat box. Or if you don't have access to the chat box and you'd just like to raise your digital hand, just do that and one of the team will see your hand and we can get you to switch your microphone on and chat to me. But Niven, I also see you back in here again. What do you think lies ahead for Cotlands in the next 85 years? What do you think of my thoughts around what Cotlands needs to be doing?
No, I mean, unsurprisingly, and as per usual, I love the provocation and the expansion of my understanding of some of the things that are going on. I think to add to your litany of remarkable youngsters, there is, of course, as I'm sure you know of him even better than I do, Sia Zuza from the Eastern Cape. For those of you who don't know the story, this wonderful youngster who decided to, as one does in Umtata, invent a better rocket fuel than the ones that currently existed. And as I understand it, blew up his mother's kitchen in that experimentation. But in so doing, got the attention of NASA, got a scholarship over to Harvard, and now has a small planet named after him. So in the midst of the decay and decrepitude of the Eastern Cape, this astonishing kid and energy. So while we wait for other questions, Graeme, and you'll obviously go to Amanda's after mine, I had something that really struck me as you were speaking, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while. I think a lot of people are writing about the fact that we've entered an era post-truth. And so it's one thing to disagree